Phil Burnell, known better by his web handle DarkSydePhil, often abbreviated to DSP, is a YouTube Let's Player that's carved out a nice portion of the internet for himself. The main downside to what he's done is that he's made himself into a target by totally and completely mismanaging his online business. DSP's primary appeal is his gaming content, but it's not because he has anything to actually show or share with anybody, but rather his reactions to negative events in his media are often hilarious. Video games are his vice of choice, and you would assume that with many years of sitting around and pressing buttons, he would have gotten better at playing said games, but he always manages to fail in the most hilarious of ways. It doesn't matter if it's a game that he's familiar with, one that he's played to completion years before, or if it's literally meant for children. Phil will always find a way to screw up and put his foot in his mouth. But being bad at video games isn't that big of a deal, right? I'd wager that all of us have encountered games that challenge us just a tad bit too much. It does suck when that happens, but that's just part of the experience.
I'm dead! I'm dead! This game sucks.
Phil is not unlike us in that regard. Rather than putting the game down and taking a breather, he instead becomes enraged, furious that the game was programmed in such a way that he can't finish it. He'll rant and rave, yelling at the screen, looking for any possible way that he could shift the blame of his lack of gaming prowess onto anybody or anything else. All of his streams get archived either by him or interested parties, and anytime he decides to go into an all-caps rage, his onlookers waste no time compiling clips of him getting frustrated, showing his worst moments for all to see.
I pressed jump. Fuck it, I'm done. I'm done with this game, seriously. The game sucks.
Because of his notoriety, Phil has been stuck ruminating online, unable to pursue more meaningful avenues of employment, either because he doesn't want to do so, or he can't due to his infamy. His years of whining, yelling, fapping, it's all combined into a hulking amalgam of cringe and ignorance, but also some level of misunderstanding. No matter what DSP does, he will always be stuck in the exact same spot that he is currently in, having not moved from his position since he started, and no matter what the trolls seem to try, he will always survive, much to the chagrin of everybody, including himself. This is the tale of DarkSydePhil, his shaky streaming business, and the many trials of his unusual life. Back in the more humble days of the 2000s, Phil was obsessing over fighting games. Gaming tournaments were becoming increasingly popular, especially due to the reach video games had on the internet, so it wasn't uncommon for people to come together and organize tournaments for their favorite games. Phil's preferred game was Street Fighter II Turbo, the fifth installment in the line of Street Fighter II releases. Street Fighter II Turbo was renowned for its increase in difficulty, because of its increased speed or hard but buggy CPU characters in the American version. The difficulty being dialed up meant that the players themselves would have to become more competitive and possibly play more aggressively, which was definitely the route that was taken by Phil. The first version of the game was a PlayStation port, which was widely regarded as an inferior version of the full game. It was plagued with console-specific bugs and was generally seen as unfit for competitive tournaments. DSP, unsurprisingly, chose to play this version exclusively over any other kind of port. He took it very seriously, investing many hours of his nights going back and forth with the artificial intelligence that was smacking him around in matches. All things considered, DSP isn't the worst at this game, and he'd probably smoke most people that play against him, but his aggression shows regardless of what he's doing. And I'll be honest, I'm pretty damn bad at fighting games, so I'm sure he would push my shit in. His anger became the starting point for his infamy in the Street Fighter tournament scene, earning him the nickname the King of Hate. Phil used this moniker as a weapon against his rivals, as he tried to suggest that he was taking the hate that he received for his mad skills and controversial opinions in stride, turning it into gold on the battlefield. Others, however, contradicted his claims. It's widely accepted that he received his name because of how hateful he was towards the other contestants during events. A classic example of his behavior can be seen in the video DSP Gets Disqualified from SF4 Tournament, uploaded by DSP Cult Leader Returns. This clip showcases his unwarranted fury as he's playing Street Fighter, as if the game is more important than life itself. The person calling out his name, who I assume was managing the tournament, was just trying to get DSP on the ball and to stop making a fool of himself, but that also requires too much self-awareness for Phil to pull off.
DSP, stop recording, no one gives a shit, play, you can't hold up a tournament. I'm waiting for DSP to report this match as disqualified.
Where am I playing? You still haven't told me! Jesus Christ, man! Treat you like your own. Want me to run your fucking tournament for you?
But if that wasn't enough autistic rage for you, check this out. The same channel uploaded another clip from a later point in DSP's YouTube career where he gets his ass kicked by an 11-year-old kid in Killer Instinct. It may be hard to accept, but there's always someone out there that is better than you at your favorite thing, and oftentimes they're younger than you, and that's what makes them more capable. DSP, of course, can't be humble. In this clip, he's playing as Glacius, the really freaky-looking fighter that towers over the other. Just watch how quickly Phil goes from thinking he's got this match in the bag before he eventually gets his poo pushed in by his opponent.
That's the best skin I've ever seen in any fighting game ever. Shut up, kid. Dude, I swear to God, I didn't do that throw. Sometimes he does throws by himself. Whatever, dude. It's random bullshit. Fuck this. Terrible. This guy wasn't good at all. He just kept hitting me with moves and I was holding back the whole fucking time. Sure, dude. Look at him trying to show off. He did the double ultra with the fucking break, the combo break in it. The instinct break. He's still going. And he dropped it.
I'm afraid your path ends here.
That was so fucking lame, dude. He just stood there with me in the corner, just hitting me nonstop. I couldn't block anything he did. It's fucking stupid.
Phil's notoriety would continue to blossom as he eventually attended EVO 2005. This was the Evolution Championship Series, an esports event that features fighting game matches and cultivates a culture around them. Many players were disqualified from the tournament for using the PlayStation version of Street Fighter II, but Phil still managed to weasel his way in. Through the grace of God and the lack of skill of other players, Phil somehow managed to land 4th place. According to the Street Fighter fandom wiki, he was the highest-ranking American player on the list, being beaten by 3 Japanese players, with the one placing first being unknown, leaving behind the alias of Gian. Kinda weird, isn't it? The ultimate victor that beat Phil remains a mystery. Or maybe I'm just stupid and I couldn't find it. Phil used his placement from this tournament to call himself the highest-ranking Street Fighter II Turbo player in America, which is a title that he was extremely proud of, as if it meant anything to the real world. I'm sure there were plenty of women just creaming at the thought of getting with the 3rd loser from a Street Fighter tournament. Other people in the community didn't take the results very seriously, considering this version of Street Fighter was widely disregarded. This meant that Phil's self-appointed name really didn't mean jack shit in the eyes of everyone else. Phil's ego was a major point of contention back then, which is great because it still is today, but this often got him into more trouble. He had an ongoing beef with another tournament attendee known as Viscant. This competitor had been making a name for himself in the fighting game community as a formidable player. DSP has always seen himself as better than others, and as such he began to take shots at Viscant. Viscant was gradually growing tired of Phil talking shit, eventually challenging him to a battle in whatever game that Phil desired. On top of this, it was going to be a money match, so not only would Phil's alleged title be placed in limbo, but there would be some cold, hard cash on the line. Viscant knew that DSP was too much of a coward to take the challenge. There's no way that the King of Hate would actually stoop that low, right? Feeling the heat, Phil tried to laugh it off, even suggesting that instead of throwing it down in Street Fighter or some other applicable video game, that they instead exchange pummeling blows in person. You know, some classic fisticuffs to settle their differences. Due to Viscant's familiarity with hand-to-hand combat and having been to a gym at least once or twice in his life, he agreed, and the two began planning out the skirmish, trying to figure out who could be the referee and all the other things that are required to schedule a fight. This was going to be an MMA-style battle, including a weigh-in and all kinds of other crap. Phil later tried to get out of the fight by messaging Viscant and trying to arrange some sort of throw. He actually tried to suggest that, and get this, they should both DX crotch chop to the crowd as some kind of joke, like it was a big goof from the very beginning. Viscant was understandably very annoyed by this, but agreed to drop everything because he could see in hindsight that this was all very, very dumb. Phil had this weird on and off relationship with being humble. Sometimes, though rarely, he managed to shut his mouth and keep himself out of trouble, but this never really lasted for any sizable duration of time. He'd often talk smack online about his competition, and would later be confronted about it in person during various tournaments. One time, Jaha, a notable member of the fighting game community whose name I'm sure I'm mispronouncing, confronted Phil about all the shit that he had been saying about him on the internet. After all, Phil certainly talked a big game when he was in the safety of his home. Jaha towered over him, his muscles popping out from under his skin, ready to play Phil like he was an accordion. DSP's only understanding of combat was in video games, so instead of engaging with Jaha in person and settling the score once and for all, he instead ran away to a bathroom to cry until the threat had been diminished. This story haunts DSP to this very day, with his viewers often bringing this up as part of his many failures. But his cowardice leading him to sulking in a restroom is something that'll follow him until the day he drops. Phil properly started his content creation career a few years after the dawn of YouTube. He began uploading videos in 2008 for fun, putting out haphazardly thrown together recordings for an extremely small audience. This was a very cozy time for the site because the platform was still trying to find its identity, and that included the site's many users. Phil opted to take a camcorder and point it directly at his screen, rather than getting his hands on a capture card. While other people took their gameplay pretty seriously, Phil angled his work to be more like a goofy couch-bound gaming session, like you and him are in the same room and he's actively playing a video game and spitting out one-liners and quips. For the time, this really resonated with people, allowing Phil to portray himself as some kind of loose cannon who would say whatever was on his mind. This, coupled with his ever-increasing inability to play games efficiently, made for quite a show.
Oh, so tedious. Oh shit, looks like there's a shitload of them on that side. Well, so much for this tank, but at least I took another one out. What the fuck just happened? What the fuck just happened? The contracting faction has become hostile towards you. Is that my fucking fault? Are you kidding me? I was so close. What the fuck?
Other people found his commentary to be boring at best and downright unwatchable at worst. Many people often cited his humor as being too offensive or that he was trying too hard to be funny. Others found his mannerisms, like his laugh or throat clearing, to be despicable and disgusting. Even with this, he was able to form a sizable following, attaining thousands of views and active watchers. Even if they were actually there to support him or laugh at his work, they were there regardless, so in a way he was still winning at this point in time. It's just a shame that most games were still smacking him around because he couldn't figure out the controls, or he'd blamed the game for his lack of skills. But still, things were looking up. This would go on for a few years without many improvements to the content. While it may have started off humbly and had this warm and welcoming vibe to it, the market for the type of media that he was producing was really starting to show signs of oversaturation, so many people began to innovate the ways that they'd make their videos. Others were investing time and money into content branding, more focused videos, higher quality footage via capture cards, better microphones, the works. Everybody had the potential of becoming a hit YouTuber. Phil, however, mostly ruminated, producing the same type of low-effort stuff for years to come. He seems to have felt that this gave him an advantage. While everyone else was improving or getting flashier, he kept things simple. In actuality, it was because he was being lazy, but that also goes without saying.
Okay, I finally beat that piece of shit Mercs 2, and I'm trying a new game, Saints Row 2. I am having a hell of a fucking time with this racing stage. I mean, you're in a helicopter, so understandably it's not easy to control. Alright? I can turn to the right. Oh, come on, turn right! Look at this! Every time you hit something, you go flying around, so there's nothing you can do. If you hit something, you're gonna blow up. There's just nothing you can do about it. You have to be almost perfect.
DSP was, for all intents and purposes, still killing it. He was raking in good views, people knew who he was, which undoubtedly had to feel good for him. He routinely appeared on the front page of YouTube, and his engagement was really off the charts. This was a good period for Phil, and a good time for his viewers. Who could have predicted that things would get progressively screwier as time went on? Trouble started brewing in April of 2010 when Phil's YouTube channel was struck down. At the time, it was believed that Ubisoft, the creators of many renowned franchises that have all unfortunately turned into wet dog shit, was behind the takedown. The allegation was that Phil had been making inflammatory comments while playing Splinter Cell Conviction. I guess saying bad words while playing games is enough to breach copyright. For the time being, Phil had to move over to his King of Hate HD channel, which, call me crazy, but wouldn't this have been ban evasion? Aren't there rules against that?
Now here's something that pisses me off. I'm going to admit this openly, this pisses me off. A new game should sell itself on its own merit. So if you like Splinter Cell, or this game, Splinter Cell, should sell itself on its own merits. Why the fuck, on the front of the game here, which I know you're not going to be able to see because as you get closer it gets more blurry, why is it advertised the Ghost Recon Future Soldier beta is included in this game? Like, Do people really, are they going to run out and buy this game because it has the Ghost Recon beta? And the sad part is, some people actually fucking do. Because, if you can believe it, when the game Crackdown came out a couple years back, that game had the Halo 3 beta inside, and people bought that game solely because it had the Halo 3 beta. That's fucking retarded, dude.
These videos were identical to his previous recordings, and they really didn't seem to provide anything that was actually shocking or different. This was quite fishy because it was obviously nothing here that Ubisoft would care about, and there was also nothing present that was infringing upon their copyright. People were left scratching their heads in confusion. None of this made any sense. It was later revealed that this was all done by a copyright troll who submitted a fake copyright claim to YouTube, claiming that he worked for Ubisoft. YouTube, doing its job oh so attentively, accepted the copyright claim as a genuine legal motion. They didn't even try to verify the claim or get any credentials from anybody, so as to authenticate the legitimacy of the entire thing, instead of waiting after the copyright claim had gone through to verify everything with Ubisoft, which of course they denied as they weren't behind it. When this all came to light, Phil got his channel back and went back to putting up the same nonsense that he was producing before. Big day for people who like to watch others play video games poorly rather than doing so themselves. Now that Phil had his channel back, he decided that he was going to make all of his work actually worth it, and got set up with AdSense in order to turn a profit from all the time he spent playing video games. About damn time, right? He had previously been laid off from his position at Helicopter Support Inc., and I have my doubts about him wanting to dig ditches, so making his hobby into a career did make sense at the time, I guess. The money was good, but it was never really good enough. AdSense calculates your earnings through a variety of factors, such as how many views you get, the amount of ads that are played, if the ads get clicked on, those types of things. Phil wasn't satisfied with the perpetual passive income on his videos after they're put out, so he actively begged his audience to click on the advertisements and to let them play completely. Unfortunately for DSP, this is against the terms when you sign up for AdSense. You can't encourage or demand your viewers artificially inflate your channel's value by watching ads and clicking on all of them. As such, his AdSense partnership was terminated. This was a major blow to Phil. The layoff from before and now this being his main source of income meant that he just lost all of his safety net. Everything was totally ruined, and he had to act fast if he didn't want to end up on the street. Being fast is something Phil rarely manages. At this time, video hosting was still a very new and exciting market. Everybody wanted to get in on the action that YouTube had, so competition was ramping up for what would eventually be a big nothing burger. Other services like Blip TV were looking to make their platform bigger, and when Phil opted to move over to their service, it didn't take long for him to get partnered up. Phil's content had not changed, and neither had he. He pointed his camera at his TV and got back to work playing video games, if you can actually call that work. This was all fine and dandy and the partnership was fruitful, until it wasn't. Like I said, Phil had learned nothing and didn't seem to want to clean up his act. On part 4 of his playthrough of the Dead Space 2 demo, Phil felt the best thing that he could do for this recorded video was make an offhand comment. I mean, Dead Space 2 is a spooky game, so why not try to break the tension? But what exactly did he say?
This is what happens when you let the Jews do whatever they want. You've let the Jews overrun space, and now look at this. Their greed has had the artifact turn everyone into necromorphs. So now I, the last remaining Nazi, must exterminate them. Hello, Jew. I killed him with one shot. Damn.
He might have said a few things that might have rustled a few jimmies. This could have been very easily avoided, considering that this wasn't a live stream where he said something stupid during a candid moment. This was pre-recorded content. He could have easily redone this section and not said anything, or cut out the offensive stuff, period. It's such a simple thing to solve, and instead of having the foresight to not risk his business, he instead said the thing that'd get him in trouble. Blip TV was contacted regarding the statement about astronautical Jewish folk, and they responded by closing his account, severing all ties with him. What a bold move. He lost his YouTube channel once before, he no longer had AdSense, he couldn't even bite his tongue for long enough to turn things around on Blip. If you're ever feeling down about yourself, don't forget that you'll never be as stupid as Phil, and you probably play games better than him too. Things weren't exactly peachy keen for Phil, who was licking his wounds after being electronically smacked around by the internet for making poorly thought out jokes. AdSense wasn't really something he'd be able to re-establish a good relationship with. And Blip TV? Yeah, sure. As if that'd ever take off and be worthwhile, even if he didn't screw himself 6 ways from Sunday. But then, like a helping hand from the gods, Machinima came into play. Machinima was an entertainment network that was founded in January 2000 by Hugh Hancock. Its namesake was 3D animations made through video games. Think things like Red vs. Blue, movies or shows that are recorded entirely through recorded gameplay. Back in those days, Machinima used to be huge. stage. Video games were still a new market for video experimentation at the time, and people were going out of their way to create interesting or engaging content via their favorite games. Lots of titles started to support clip recording, such as recording sequences of animations that are being played back on screen, and introduced built-in camera tools and video editing frameworks that made it easier for players to create media in their favorite video games. Machinima as a company was made to profit from that idea, and to spread the name of the medium as a valid and exceptional artwork. Yeah, right. Machinima was a massive network on the YouTube platform and became incredibly lucrative for people who wanted to make money playing video games. Setting up AdSense and managing the business side of things isn't always somebody's forte. Not everybody is mentally equipped for these kinds of things, which is where Machinima would come in and handle the process for them. They would also provide a bit of a legal safety net in case anybody wanted to silence any of their creators or contractors. All of this lovely support and assistance at the cost of shared revenue. With a business model like this, and the notably fragile one that Phil had built for himself, it makes perfect sense that he was eventually signed with their electronic video label, because why not? All he had to do was keep making the same type of content that he was known for, just with a touch less anti-Semitism, which likely posed a few obstacles for him. But nevertheless, he got through it. Would Phil be able to meet the quotas required of him and bite his tongue long enough to not land himself in more hot water? Only time would tell. Phil joined in on Machinima's fun in 2011 and was met with a relatively lukewarm reception. Fans were happy that he had a reason to keep making the content that they knew him for, but others found his attitude and recording style to be redundant at best and downright pathetic at worst. By this point, the generally accepted method of capturing gameplay footage was with the use of a capture card, a piece of hardware that captures the audio and video of whatever is being broadcasted to a TV screen. A bit of a buffer technology, if you will. Rather than improve the quality of his content in any way, big or small, Phil decided to stick with what he knew, pointing his camera at his TV and creating substandard, boring, poorly constructed content. The audio mixing was crap because he was in a room that wasn't modified for audio recording, and the video quality? I don't think that requires any real explanation. Despite this, his association with Machinima proved to be a fruitful endeavor, as he was getting even more views and the money train was back on track. Phil finally had something to jumpstart his work drive again, and by work drive, I mean he got some gusto and sat around recording himself tinkering with his hobby.
I can't hit him. I can't fucking... Dude, I'm holding left trigger, which is supposed to snap to aim at him, and it's not. It's missing it like a lot. I don't get it.
This was happening during the golden age of online console gaming, and instead of relying on big tournament events to show off his mad gamer skills, he could turn on his Xbox and get some footage of him smoking dudes in an online match. The problem with this is that gaming was an even bigger market than it was just a few years prior, and now even more people than ever were getting in on the online matchmaking experience. I don't know if you, the viewer, are any good at video games, and let me tell you, if you are, I commend you. But I think we can all agree that no matter how good you are at something, there's always someone out there who's better. When you're someone like Phil who has no discernible talents or skills for gaming, even though he spends a disproportionate amount of time playing said games, heading into the world of online competitive matchmaking wasn't necessarily his smartest move. The sweatiest of multiplayer games is a tough toss-up between first-person shooters, which don't get me started on Phil trying to aim in games, and fighters like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Smash, that kind of stuff. As we understand by now, Phil prefers games that either hold his hand through the entire process or allowed him to mash buttons to get his way. Phil opted to show off his prowess in some cyber fighting. More often than not, Phil would get his back end pushed in by random folks that he was matching up with in his queue.
Oh my god, look at the lag! Ah, he's inducing lag. He's inducing lag. Oh, gee, I wonder why I lost. He fucking induced lag at the end. This is PSN, yes! Yes, PSN gameplay.
These were videos that he recorded that he could have optionally chosen not to upload to the internet. It's not like this happened during a live and he couldn't avoid showing himself getting resized. This was a cognitive decision on his part. And to make matters worse, if he wasn't kicking ass in a match, it was always some kind of astronomical catastrophe that caused his plays to be crap. Or, in every other instance, the player was abusing exploits or using game hacks or just playing like an asshole. It couldn't have possibly been that DSP was bad at video games or just met his match. No, not even close. It's always some whacked out crazy explanation that makes less sense than just accepting reality. In between Phil's misadventures with online creation and banging his own head against the wall until he left a DSP-shaped dent, Phil met Panda Lee, his honey for that period of his life. Panda Lee, whose real name is Leanna Hangen, I'm sure I mispronounced that, was certainly able to stomach some of the things that other women couldn't. Leanna and Phil began dating at some point in 2011. Phil didn't show her off initially, keeping his love life separate from his business. But this decision would only be short-lived, however, as he'd instead begin to incorporate her into his YouTube videos and promote her own channel. Her arrival to his online universe happened on February 12, 2012, at a Valentine's Day themed video where Phil stuck his chest out and professed his love for his woman. How sweet.
Hello everyone, DarkSydePhil here, and with me today is my beautiful girlfriend, Leanna, who also is known as Panda Lee on YouTube, and we just wanted to make a quick video. As you know, I've been spending the weekend with her because, you know, I was going to be busy on Valentine's Day, so we wanted to make a special video just to say Happy Valentine's Day to everyone out there who, you know, gets to spend it with a significant other. If not, play video games, I guess.
Yep.
At this time, Leanna lived in a different state, and long-distance relationships tend to have issues that arise from, well, distance. This meant that any content that they made together, like recording themselves playing games, could only be filmed sporadically as she would have to make trips up to Connecticut to be with her piggy Pookie. She looked pretty uncomfortable in the video, and some people have tried to suggest that it's because the relationship was already so sour. While I have no doubts that she experienced tribulations with being romantically and sexually involved with Phil, I also have my doubts that he was just this awful person who forced her into doing YouTube with him. I think they were both just nerdy, socially stunted people that created an awkward and somewhat uncomfortable video. Though, I can't lie. Imagining him forcing her to play video games with him at gunpoint is a pretty funny thought. The reception to Leanna being involved with DSP was pretty mixed. There were two camps, one that was happy that Phil was able to find love and hoped that it would bring him all the happiness in the world, and the other side who saw her as some kind of threat or an idiot. She was either there to ruin everything with her influence, like some kind of Yoko Ono type situation, or she was just there to make him sandwiches. But regardless, a partition of his audience believed that she was just as bad as Phil. So, I mean, in a way, some detractors thought that they were a perfect match for each other. You really can't hope for much better, right?
I need some chocolate. I can't cope with people being stupid lately. I have an intolerance for stupid lately. And for laziness. My God. It's the internet, people! Where everything is a few mouse and button clicks away and we're still lazy! God damn, we have no hope. Damn, this chocolate's good.
She was a little aggressive, was prone to complaining, essentially aping all of the behaviors that Phil was doing. His influence honestly knows no bounds. I think when reflecting on DSP's life, it's important to view her as a milestone. I'm not saying this as a means to degrade her or something, but rather that she served a value to his life, like a possession, a physical representation of his growth as a man. He was building his business, making his opinions known. He had a car, a place to live, things to put inside said place, and a girlfriend that probably let him put his Jimmy in her. These are the things that made him feel like an accomplished man. Strip him of these things that he uses as foundation and he will undoubtedly crumble. It was never an if regarding the end of their relationship and the beginning of a new paradigm, but rather when. But we'll talk about that more when we get there. In 2012, Phil began a small series with his buddies called Project 7. From what I was able to find, this was originally something he did for his DarkSydePhil channel in 2010, with the end of that story being that Phil was forced to stay in his condo and play banned video games for the rest of eternity. This was during a time when people were still somewhat copying the whole side plot skit thing that AVGN popularized, only DSP wanted to do something more with it. Rather than just having a side story that gives basic explanation as to why this reviewer character is engaging with a game for the video, it would instead be an ongoing plotline that would work as a standalone product. An ambitious project for sure, and certainly not something that would be in DSP's wheelhouse. It's not necessarily anything that's too terrible, it sort of just feels like a couple of buddies making goofy home movies, and I suppose it is just that, so I can't really hate it. These videos have done alright, with a few 100,000 views apiece. The worst thing they'll ever do is make you cringe. But everything was cringe back then, and let's be honest, most things are now. Phil's demeanor was becoming more and more hostile as he continued to put out media. This was something that fresh new viewers were noticing right away, which turned off a majority of the people that were just stopping by. Despite how much humans love to watch a dumpster fire, some people just can't stomach hateful rhetoric or behavior. Due to all of this happening on the internet, a sizable and actively growing portion of his audience was sticking around to watch him fumble. They celebrated any time he screwed up a match, but let's be fair, that was pretty much every single time. They clipped whenever he made a mistake while navigating a game's story or said something stupid without thinking beforehand. His attitude had not only manifested in a way that was harming him and his public image, but now his viewers had a justified reason, at least in their eyes, to stop supporting him, instead joining the side that was rooting for his downfall.
Instant death! The fucking guy with the shotgun. What am I supposed to do? Instant death! Spawn and die, spawn and die. How much fun is this? All I want to do is get a fucking med pack, and I can't even get a single point as the medic.
His viewership was starting to gradually dwindle, largely due in part to his mouth overloading his ass. People weren't impressed by a grown man throwing temper tantrums because he failed to follow the pretend rules of a piece of fiction. People were actively unsubscribing or checking out his products less at the bare minimum, which deeply impacted his cash flow. Phil was watching his numbers slip away through his fingers, and instead of stepping back to assess what he was doing, he instead decided to double and then triple down on everything he was doing. As I always catch myself saying, what could possibly go wrong? While he may have hit dangerous water and had difficulty adequately steering his ship from the non-moving rocks that were right in front of him, Phil did use his notoriety and resurgence of his actively declining views to make his voice heard. In 2012, the internet was under the threat of the SOPA/PIPA fiasco, an internet censorship bill that sought to make the World Wide Web less about human expression and freely shared information, targeting to make it a corporate hellscape while rapidly limiting free speech. The very thing we're seeing happen today. Don't you just love how much everything sucks now? Phil was outspoken against these bills, pointing out how they would negatively impact the internet as a whole. If these bills were to go through, the government could have had the authority to bully, fine, and shut down services that they deemed infringing. This could either be for political reasons or because of alleged copyright infringement. So if you happen to be a YouTuber who used a few seconds of a copyrighted clip, you could be held liable beyond just having the potential earnings for that upload garnished. Remember, big businesses and the government do not care about you. This is just a footnote in the lengthy story that we're going over, but I think it's worth noting that Phil's heart has been in the right place before. He may be a very foolish man who has put his foot in his mouth more times than you and I could ever count using all of our hands, but he did try to be a voice of reason when the world was seemingly going crazy. For all of the things that were unprofessional and downright wrong with his internet presence, at least for a brief moment, he was using his notoriety to do something good. That should be commended, even if it was something that happened only for a moment. Despite everything, however, things were still not looking good for Mr. Burnell. Machinima reached out to renegotiate the arrangement that they had with him. These negotiations ultimately led to Phil receiving less money than was previously agreed upon. He was undoubtedly not satisfied with these results, but there was really nothing much else he could do. His own behavior had cost him a noticeable portion of his viewership, and he didn't seem to want to adjust his disposition, so he had to just take what he could get. I'll never understand how Phil was able to undo his work so easily. Honestly, just from everything I'm reading and observing, it feels like he wanted this outcome. But of course he didn't, because that wouldn't make sense. Still, here we are. Obviously, by this point, Phil's audience was not approving of his work ethic. They could see that he was handed golden opportunities time after time, and he couldn't keep his grubby little butterfingers wrapped around these chances for the life of him. Not many people get a second or third chance to try their hand at business, and it didn't seem to register to Phil just how lucky he was in this scenario. On April 20th, 2012, Phil put out a video titled, quote, "Important to those who think I've changed," where he attempted to clear the air regarding what was going on with him and his channel. During this video, DSP tried to rewrite history and suggest that his beginnings on YouTube were always negative. People were constantly dogging on him for how he played games or how he talked and the quality of his videos, and then public opinion about him shifted to a more positive light, until it became this nonsense about him being his own man and working for nobody and standing on business. This is silly because Phil was working for Machinima. They were taking a portion of his income to provide him with specific services, and he was essentially a private contractor for them. I don't get where he was getting this idea that he was some kind of gung-ho rebel because he sat around recording himself playing video games for a job, but whatever, I guess.
Which then turns into like a grassroots fan base, which kind of explodes on YouTube over the years. People saying, wow, here's a guy who's honest, who's truthful, he doesn't work for anyone in particular, he can say whatever he wants to say about a game, and he doesn't cater to any audience, he does whatever he wants, he plays whatever he wants, he doesn't advertise, he doesn't, ooh, like the video, thumbs up the video, click on this, favorite this. He never does that in a video because that's not me. That's not the kind of person I am.
For him to suggest that he was doing this for anything beyond income and gratification is just a load of crap. It's one thing to have a hobby channel that you make little to no money off of and don't intend to make into a business, and it's another when said hobby channel is then turned into a job, of your own volition mind you, and now you've got to keep it afloat. After you've turned your passion into a career, you have responsibilities, and you're not uploading content because it's a hobby, but rather you need the money in order for the business to be sustainable. Not to mention, what's the point of uploading anything if you're not getting anything out of it? Even if there's no money to be made or views to attain, it should always be about gratification. It feels good to see a project be appreciated, especially when you've invested so much time into it, and having anything beyond that, like some profit, is just icing on the cake. I get it. I just wish that he was more transparent instead of trying to claim that he is. I would argue that he didn't owe anybody any explanation, but by trying to give one, he took on more responsibilities than he ever wanted. Phil remarked that he had noticed a hostile shift in his audience in recent months, at least from what he was able to gather from reading his comments or looking up his name in the right circles. He tried to frame everything in a way where his fans had allegedly gotten angry that he had, quote, gone corporate due to his ongoing agreement with Machinima, and that he didn't actually care for his audience. Only one of those things is true. DSP doesn't personally know his viewers because they're just random people, so how could he possibly know them and therefore care about them beyond just being people that make him feel good when they say nice things? In actuality, people were just tired of Phil's persona. It's not because he was a bad boy or started acting like a suit, but rather he was just disingenuous and his stage presence relied on a bunch of hogwash. He wasn't this hardcore gamer with years of experience under his belt, making in-depth tutorials using his illustrious skills. He was a grown man who was fumbling around in video games, shifting the blame onto others whenever things didn't go exactly his way.
I'll be honest, as of late, and I would say probably the past, I would say all 2012, let's put it that way. Since 2012 started, I've seen some shifting attitudes. And keep in mind, the only attitudes that I see are when people leave comments on my videos or post on my forums, okay? That's the stuff that I see. I don't know if there's other underlying stuff going on. I have no idea. All I know is what I see because it's visible in front of me. And what I've seen is that there is this movement of people who seem to think that since I am now, I've been doing this for about a year and making a living off of it, that I've sold out. I've gone corporate. I'm doing it only for money. It's the only reason I'm doing it. And if everything's about views and making money, and I don't care about the fans anymore, and I police my videos too much, if anyone says anything negative ever on a DSP video, they immediately get blocked from the videos forever, which, a lot of people say, well, what's the big deal about getting blocked from a YouTube channel? Well, the bottom line is if you do get blocked, if you're subbed to that person, it unsubs you permanently, okay? So keep in mind, when people get blocked from my channel, I'm actually hurting myself because I'm making them forcefully unsub, okay? So I'm fully aware that if someone gets blocked from my channel, the consequences to me. There is negative consequences to me when I block someone, okay?
If Phil was going to do anything with his life and make the big bucks, he was going to have to keep up with the speed of the rapidly changing YouTube market. Sure, he was making some money, maybe not as much as he could, but still, he was making scratch nonetheless. But then again, he could always make more. Doubling down on the gaming would just mean he was oversaturating his own market. So not only would his competition be a problem, but he'd be overwhelming his subscribers with a bunch of gaming content that they probably weren't going to watch anyway. He had to start adjusting the way he approached media production. The same old tricks can't possibly work time and time again. How could he branch out and try something new, while still being true to himself and saying all this stupid, ignorant crap he's known for? He would start doing regular vlogs and reviews of non-gaming related things. Wow, a gaming content creator not talking about video games. I'm sure this will really help him soar to new heights. This actually wasn't something entirely new for him, but rather something he did only on rare occasions but ramped up production once his online infamy was starting to take off. He claimed that people wanted him to return to the series after a few years of not updating it, and while I do have no doubts that there were a few fans that might have actually liked the old vlogs, I can't help but feel like he was either lying about the demand for the return to form, or perhaps they were hoping that he would make some more garbage. Either one is incredibly likely. At the cost of sacrificing your innocence, you could watch DSP take a shower, because who hadn't pondered the thought of what Phil would look like while bathing? What? You're telling me you've never gotten lost in adulation just thinking about him getting all sudsy and damp? Huh, weird. I guess, I'll just move on from that. Or, hear me out, you could check out his review on a hand exerciser. Phil is a major league gamer, so of course he needs to train up his kung fu grip for his DualShock. Funny thing about this was he was likely honing his skills for a bit of pud pulling. These videos received a mixed reception. Once again, the meager amount of true fans he did have were happy to get something new from him, while the partition of the audience that had a less favorable opinion about him would just shit all over whatever he put out, and rightfully so. It's not like he was working hard to make these videos, not to mention it sort of seemed like a strange direction to push his brand. I mean, look at the way he edited his videos to have certain branding. It's not like he did something different, but rather it's strange that he applied the Machinima insignia to his non-gaming videos. You can't deny that there's something off with showing the Machinima intro before he reviews a ham sandwich, right? It just seems weird, at least to me. Then again, who am I to judge? Maybe Machinima wanted him to show their logo before he reviewed some adult diapers he got on clearance. All in all, this did very little to improve the public's opinion about him, and mostly just served to show that he had no idea what he wanted to do with his professional career. DSP struggles with the primary thing he relied on for content, playing video games, became more and more apparent as he continued to get more views. The year 2012 marked a pretty low point for the DSP brand, and the audience wasn't thrilled about the current state of affairs. People were really starting to take note of his uploads, finding discrepancies in his opinions and pointing out the various outward flaws that he demonstrated. It was only a matter of time before somebody would grab a hold of his mighty autism and squeeze it like a cow's teat for some of its plentiful milk. One viewer, going by the name EvilAJ2010, pointed out that Phil's noticeable drop in viewership and video quality coincided with the arrival of Pandali to his content. This, alongside other less than enthused comments, were immediately removed by Phil upon his notice, and they were subsequently hidden from his channel. It's important to note that while he was getting a variety of negative comments and he undoubtedly had to remove ones that deserved to be deleted, like posting DarkSydePhil or threatening to resize his holes, a disproportionate amount of his removals were directed at people that just had criticism towards him. That's right, it wasn't just about silencing people that wanted to be malicious, he wanted to control the narrative, so if you checked his comments you'd think that people were neutral to him at worst, or they loved him otherwise. In retaliation to the strike against him, EvilAJ2010 compiled a series of clips of DSP sucking balls at gaming, titled, quote, "This is how you don't play Metal Gear Solid 2, and proceeded to show off just how bad Phil was at playing games, the very thing he tried to act like was his claim to fame. This legendary video was published on February 13th, 2013. Not only did this upload feature a slew of hilarious clips of Phil failing to play the game properly, but it featured snippets from comments left on the original video that drew attention to his lack of skill and professionalism, like how he ignored important mechanics that the game carefully explained to him. Tutorials mean nothing to Phil. In fact, that might as well have been a boss round for him. This shit's too complicated. At the time of this recording, this video sits at a whopping 857,554 views. All things considered, for a video dedicated to just laughing at an idiot who routinely bit off more than he could ever possibly hope of chewing, this video has done remarkably well. The This Is How You Don't Play series became a staple of EvilAJ's channel, and other people started joining in on the fun, copying the motifs from EvilAJ's original series. Just searching up the phrase "This is how you don't play" will lead you to a slew of archived and compiled DSP streams where he blames the games for his own faults, or tries to suggest that perhaps the people that made the software are idiots and that he could somehow do it better. Because I guess playing video games makes you a programming wizard, huh? A favorite of mine is his playthrough of GTA San Andreas, the current longest title in the Grand Theft Auto franchise. Phil struggled even in the first few missions, getting his ass kicked by the game telling him to pick up a baseball bat that's floating right before him. He acts as though it isn't there, like it failed to spawn or something, even though the bat is quite literally floating right next to the player character, rotating at an angle so it's even more obvious to see. Gamers like Phil are exactly why mainstream games these days rely on yellow arrows and holding your hand. The entire process is to make sure that you're treated like an infant. Thanks a lot, Phil. I hated having to use my brain when playing video games anyway.
Oh, stop it in his face.
Grab hold of that bat over there. Get out of my way.
Where's the bat? What bat?
Man, we on a serious mission now.
You should grab the bat. There's no bat.
Everybody in the hood know ballers are pussies.
There's no fucking bat.
Buster, wait up.
There's no bat. Oh, there it is. Is that it?
He's so down for the hood.
Move it, motherfucker.
There it is. I couldn't fucking see it.
These videos started to gain more viewership than Phil's own content, and when he discovered that not only were people making fun of him, but also finding major success in doing so, he was a little less than thrilled, to say the least. Phil foolishly believed that this did not fall under fair use. In his own words, sourced from a tweet posted on February 9th, 2013, "Let's Plays are covered under fair use. Just doing commentary over non-interactive video is not," which is completely wrong. The compilations are made to show context by being a fail compilation, alongside featuring some level of commentary. Therefore, it's technically safe under fair use law. Trimming the fat and making observations can go a long way. If they had uploaded his content whole cloth, claiming it as their own, attempting to be a market substitute rather than a bit of humorous commentary about the state of his content, then they would have violated fair use. He tried his best to argue his points, attempting to arbitrate with YouTube and other creators in hopes of bringing down the works of his detractors. But this did nothing for him. In doing so, he merely drew more attention to the people that were pointing their fingers and mocking him. His best chance for survival in this instance was to just hunker down, focus on making his content better, and not giving his newfound online enemies anything new to work with. A rule of thumb on the internet is to not get upset about what random people think about you. You may not like what they have to say, but they have every right to say it, and as easily as you could acknowledge it, you can just as easily ignore it. Why would you take their allegedly baseless criticism towards you seriously either? But I suppose that just makes too much sense. Phil believed that not only was this an attack against his business and his character, but also his supposed art. In his eyes, what he was putting out was demonstrably artwork, despite it mostly just being footage of him being bad at video games every single time he tried. I understand that art is something that has to be interpreted, but let's be honest. If what he does is art, then most people online who make crappy little throwaway MS Paint doodles are fucking maestros of their fields. As such, these videos only grew in popularity as disdain for Phil and his poor production quality was gradually growing and swelling up, like a festering wound that was ready to burst. His detractors never had to worry about DSP drying up beyond just being boring and playing video games badly, because he was determined to continuously spin his tires in the mud until the end of times. Nobody, not even himself, can stop him from uploading his many mishaps while gaming.
It's just what people want to see me do. Jumping on a fucking barrel for 2 hours trying to get on a fucking pipe. And there it goes. What the fuck? Is this really how Half-Life was? It was just platforming on fucking barrels the whole time? This was the game? Stop rolling! The physics are fucking weird, man. I mean, they're early 2000s physics, you know?
Trolls started to poke fun at his other types of videos, such as his DSP Tries It series, putting him in unlikely scenarios like leaving the house to see a movie, or just pointing out the many funny details in his real-life content, like when he tried his hand at the culinary arts. Would you be shocked to learn that DSP has difficulties with making a tuna salad sandwich? It's only just tuna and mayonnaise with salt and pepper and the most basic preparation, so how could he possibly find a way to screw this up? Well, believe it or not, he did find a way to do it. I'm a weird guy. I enjoy tuna salad and egg salad in moderation, but I also can't handle mayo on its own. It has to be mixed with something or disguised before my autistic brain throws a fit and shorts out. Watching Phil measure out Miracle Whip using a liquid measuring cup, which ultimately got him more of the condiment than he needed, made me want to vomit. Tuna salad is a wet dish, but it shouldn't be a sloppy, disgusting pile of off-white crap with bits of canned fish thrown in sparingly for texture. Just, ugh. What's even better is when he realizes he's created a mass of mushy garbage, he tries to cope and say that this is what happens when you don't follow a precise recipe, which he's technically right about, but he proceeded to change his tune and put the blame on the person who had wrote the recipe. You know, as if it's their fault that he decided to use an amount of Miracle Whip that he could basically drown in. I mean, he did admit that he thought he used too much, but whatever, I guess. So what is it, Phil? Is it too much or just right? Too mushy or just soupy enough? Figure it the fuck out, Goldilocks. 2014 was going to be an even more disastrous period in Phil's life. Despite the complications with his business that undoubtedly affected his cash flow, Phil opted to take a loan out to get a condo in Seattle, a city known for just how expensive it is to live there, and there were potentially some opportunities there for him, implying that he wouldn't just run them into the ground or fail to seize them entirely, but I'm sure anybody watching this would agree that you shouldn't just jump into another speculative life saga. It's not a good move considering that he was already struggling to get by, so why put himself in a situation where more things could go wrong? The move was because he wanted a change of scenery, hoping that maybe the relocation would give him the motivation required to get his butt back into gear, and he also wanted to bring Leanna with him. He was pursuing the American dream. He wanted a woman by his side, a condo that he owed a ridiculous amount of money on, and a self-run business that he could steer through the treacherous waters as he made a name for himself. The idea is humble, I'll give it that, but it's also flawed because Phil was at the helm of it. If there was any person who could take such a massive life change, something that could turn his life around for the better, and totally drop the ball beyond anything anybody could have predicted, it's DSP. This meant that not only would Phil have to provide for and take care of himself, but he'd have to do the same for his girlfriend. Self-care can be a pretty tricky task considering how busy adult life can get. Life does have a way of grinding you down into a little nub. But tackling things like supporting other people not only raises the stakes, but raises the overall stress and pressure that comes from said living situation. Phil was live streaming to Twitch at this time, and this was during its early days when the service was still called Justin TV. He was actively broadcasting to the service on a regular basis, and would often have his stream set to a high video quality so as to have a crisper image. The site staff contacted him via his stream chat, requesting that he lowered his ingested bitrate to no more than 3,500 kilobits per second, which really isn't that harsh of a request. The site was still enduring growing pains, and they were surely trying to mitigate any and all hosting issues while allowing people to freely stream on their platform. Phil argued against this, claiming that other people were still streaming above that threshold, but he'd eventually comply. I mean, there's no way he could have known that other people were streaming at a higher bitrate than he was. And quite frankly, even if they were, odds are they were much more successful than he was, and it was much more worthwhile for Justin TV to allow them to broadcast at a higher bitrate because said streamer was bringing in more views and therefore more money. It's not hard to figure out, but it's also incredibly hard to prove anything otherwise. It's just common sense, really.
What? I hit the girl. Fuck this stupid fucking mission. This mission sucks.
Instead of just gritting its teeth and sticking with the site while they figured out how they were going to address the influx of new users in recent months, Phil decided to return to YouTube as his primary host for his streams. Problem is that, well, YouTube streaming services weren't nearly as popular as what Twitch offered, and they also were in their infancy stage. Because of this, Phil got even less views and in turn got even less money. Strange how that works out, huh? He couldn't handle being told to be considerate while the people that helped him achieve his livelihood ran their operation, so he decided to shoot himself directly into his balls. Shit happens. Even with all of the stresses of having to migrate from one service to another and taking on the challenge of taking care of not only himself but his girlfriend, all while paying bills and taxes, trying at the very least to be a semi-functional and responsible adult, Phil couldn't keep himself afloat with his current avenues for income. This inspired him to take a plunge into the world of subscription-based entertainment and engagement via Patreon, joining in early 2015, which, all things considered, was surprisingly late for the trend of YouTubers getting in on the action. This is pretty interesting because it illustrates Phil's hypocrisy yet again, as prior to creating this page, he used to make disparaging comments about another gaming commentator, Angry Joe, about having his own Patreon account. These days, his Patreon seems to have been abandoned, with 19 remaining paid members, and the last post being made on December 6, 2022. Phil's journey was only going to become more tumultuous as time would move on, and on June 24, 2015, he was swatted during a live stream. He was in the middle of playing Batman Arkham Knight, and thankfully he wasn't arrested or harmed. The cops are lucky they didn't try anything funny with Phil, or else he might have had to show them some of his wacky-ass Street Fighter moves to put them in their place. Considering how swatting tends to go, Phil got off pretty lightly. He didn't have cops busting down his door or dragging him out by his folds, but rather they came, talked to him, verified nothing was wrong, and went along their way. Phil's impeccable luck just happened to save him yet again. He uploaded a video directly talking about the experience and why he believed that it happened.
Unfortunately, I have to say this. I hate the fact that I have to say it, but today was a milestone for completely the opposite reasons of anything that I would like to say or talk about. But because of what happened, because of course it is such a dramatic event, such a traumatic event, and quite honestly, such a dangerous event that happened today, I felt that I would come out myself only a couple hours after it happened. I would explain to you exactly what happened in regards to me being swatted today, because that is the subject of this video.
Over the next few days, the harassment would continue to keep pounding DSP over his head, with him being DDoSed on June 26th. For anybody whose primary income is derived from live streaming, a business that relies on the generosity of other people and having a stable internet connection, being even temporarily stripped of connectivity can be devastating. Oh no, people won't be able to watch him screw up live. Of course, the trolls weren't satisfied by this and decided to further their game with Phil, beginning a mass flagging campaign against his content. People were trying to get him taken down using fraudulent copyright violations, where people posed as copyright holders to try to get his channel put in hot water. If these attempts were successful, DSP could have received a temporary suspension or even faced an entire channel termination. This could have also impacted his ability to stream and the allowed duration of his videos from that point forward. When his live streams were impacted, all he could go to was Patreon for pledged amounts of money and hope to whatever deity that one of his videos would get picked up by the algorithm, meaning that he'd get some easy money without having to do too much. But of course, this never went well for him. To fight back against the actions of the trolls, Phil, after being advised by Machinima, removed any videos that featured fan art that was created for his channel, and for whatever reason privated his Nintendo DS game playthroughs, but you know. While this may have prevented trolls from reporting him for fan art or whatever was going on, this did negatively impact his metrics. Removing or privating videos will automatically remove existing comments and views that were tied to that product, which then appears as a steep drop in viewership and engagement for the channel. This negatively impacted the YouTube algorithm's potential for featuring his content, and further drove his channels down the drain. As far as the site's search engine was concerned, viewers were showing a waning interest in Phil, which is technically true, but it was such a drastic change in viewership that it stayed far away from him. As if the world wasn't already kicking him while he was down, Machinima reached out to renegotiate his arrangement. At this point, Machinima was on their way out. Little did they know that in a few years they'd go the way of the dodo, but they still wanted to be partnered with DSP for whatever reason. They just wanted him to earn less money. I mean, to be fair, he was undoubtedly a liability, especially after they told him to basically gut his channel. The only thing that could make this worse is if part of his adult life, you know, his sexual misadventures, came out to the open in some way. Only time would tell. To mitigate the issues with its existing channels, DSP would launch a new one in early 2016 called KO Gaming, which is what he considered to be a three-pronged plan of regaining his foothold on the market. This means he had 3 different types of media for you to consume: games, vlogs, and edited content. As if having 2 forms of crap wasn't enough, DSP was going to let out a 3rd steamer for his legion of adoring fans. KO Gaming was centered around game reviews and his other edited works, basically being his more focused channel, while the other 2 were meant to be just whatever he could muster up. The increased standard for this channel meant that he was supposed to make things that were substantially better than what he put out before, but instead this was just his usual shtick with a few extra bells and whistles. On the flip side, this did provide a way for people to get content from him without having their feeds flooded with long-form streams where Phil messes up a jump in a platformer for 33 minutes. However, YouTube content was something he was trying to take super seriously. This culminated in one of his most notorious scams, the reboot of Project 7. Remember that weird little side project I had mentioned before, the one where DSP was making home movies with his pals? Well, Phil wanted to reboot it because it was such a prominent part of his channel's history, and he wanted a weirdly disproportionate amount of money for what the product actually was. A cheaply made goofy home video that didn't have a lot of work or planning put into it. I tried to find out what the amount was, but unfortunately I was unsuccessful. I'm sure somebody in the comments will tell me that I'm stupid and let me know the actual amount. Please and thank you. The goal was reached, and before Phil could even begin to think about actually bringing everyone involved together and getting all hands on deck, he immediately postponed the production of Project 7. Because, you know, why work on something, especially when you've already been paid? His fans were not happy about the blatant scam. There was a goal, they raised money, and he didn't even make the product. It'd be one thing if he raised the money and then put out a garbage product because at the very least the product was seen to the end. But to not even attempt it, period? This made Phil's true colors apparent. Phil tried to cover his tracks and argue that postponing it indefinitely was a good thing for him and his channel, because of course it was when he already got their money, but it wasn't a scam because he said it wasn't. He claimed that he couldn't easily return the money, so instead of trying to contact the service to undo the transaction that had gone through, because being totally honest here, I feel he could get some kind of help if he had enough people rallying behind him if he actually tried, or perhaps putting the money in basic groundwork for Project 7 or maybe a charity, he'd just pocket the cash in the meantime. How could he have not seen the backlash that this would cause him? Anybody with a brain could see the risk of not providing the agreed-upon videos. Even if people weren't expecting anything that was that much better to the original series, the bar for quality was so low that he really didn't have to do much to exceed expectations. But who am I kidding? This would have cut into his precious video game time, and we just couldn't have that. On the fateful day of May 1st, 2016, Phil was set to stream himself playing the Neo Alpha demo. His fans and detractors were eagerly awaiting his struggles with common sense to be put on full display in gameplay form. He started his pre-stream segment and waited for the viewers to flood into the chat so he could properly start the broadcast. But little did he know that his face cam was already active, as he had not shut it off properly since his previous livestream. Now, many people who do live streams for hours at a time have some pre-stream rituals. As of late, I've been downing a can of Rockstar Energy so I can be energetic and spontaneous and all of those other colorful buzzwords that are kinda fun to say. And some creators make sure they get a good meal in their bellies before, or they try to clear their mind with whatever ritual works for them, and Phil in a way was no stranger to this. He has this type of stretch he does that tends to relieve his emotions, to remove the stress from his body and allow him to relax and be comfortable while playing video games for the entertainment of random people on the internet. The stretching exercise that he performs to completion prior to his broadcast involves him pulling on his man meat until he spews some baby batter into a tissue or onto the floor or on his underpants. Unfortunately for him, this stretching happened to be caught on video, with his camera pointed directly at his face the entire time. We see him go through the entire process of emotions, puffing up his cheeks, his face getting a rosy shade of pink, laying his head back as the juices were fired out of his joystick. Upon completing his task, he looked toward the camera, realizing that it had captured the entire pud-pulling session, in complete shock and disbelief that one of the most intimate parts of his life had been shared with an audience. He had to know right then and there that this shoot would never escape him, and plenty of people had already begun saving the recordings of him polishing his pole and sharing them on social media. He tried to suggest that he was just scratching at a rash that he had on his leg, because I guess everybody scratches itchy spots until they come. I get it.
Oh, the camera's on. The camera's been on the whole time, huh? I don't even know. Hello.
Phil addressed this controversy the following day during his pre-stream for Star Fox Zero, called Making a Sticky Predicament Positive. This ordeal exploded and brought him lots of attention, so in a way it did work in his favor. Other channels covered this latest controversy, including Review Tech USA before going nuclear and becoming a lolcow in his own right, and even Keemstar got in on the action before he completely embarrassed himself in the modern age. This coverage got a lot more people looking at him, especially when compared to his numbers from recent years up to that point. It was a double-edged sword. On one hand, he finally had people come and engage with his content. On the other, people just watched him crank his hog. His subscribers and overall views were up, and his review of Homefront Revolution that came out the same month had more than exceeded his expectation for views, which at the time of this video was sitting at over 1.1 million views. This popularity didn't last and died out about as quick as it began, but his reputation was only further tarnished at this point. His business was in the dumps. Despite the resurgence of interest in his content, he hadn't really moved much as far as long-term metrics go. His search engine ranking was just about the same as it was before, and it felt like he was drowning in irrelevancy even with the attention that he got from beating his meat. He made adjustments to his business, like allowing people to send in fan art for him to feature since YouTube's policies for copyright had changed for the better. He also made the foolish decision to cut back on his live streaming in hopes of focusing more on his videos, negating the fact that super chats and direct donations are far more reliable for substantial income compared to waiting for AdSense to roll in from underperforming videos. He thought that if he spent more time working on his refined content that he'd get more views and therefore make more money, but the quality of his work never changed, so this was for nothing. Phil did try to stream on November 21, 2016, but open broadcast software crashed on him and erased his settings that he had put together some years prior. Fed up with OBS's usual crap, he tried a fork called OBS Studios and eventually went back on his ruling against live streaming, returning to Twitch on November 29th for his first stream in about 2 years, playing Final Fantasy XV. Even after his return to streaming, his numbers were low, and he tried to suggest that instead of it being because he wasn't providing anything interesting for people to watch, it was instead because he was doing better at games, and that made the shows less appealing for people who wanted to watch his blunders. It's always the fault of other people, isn't it? At least he was acknowledging that most of his audience wasn't there to gas him up. In 2017, Phil made numerous changes to his content, such as lowering the video quality from 1080p 60fps to 720p 60fps, for what I assume was to cut down on his rendering time for the content, as he was attempting to push out shorter videos at a higher rate just like he used to, something recommended by Machinima in hopes of getting more quick viewership. He also created an avenue for people to send him fan-edited content, referring to it as community submissions. This allowed people to make gag modifications of his work, and he'd officially endorse it if he liked it. This led to the first official "This is how you don't play" on Phil's channel, but it's since been removed.
Oh my god! Oh my fucking god! Complete utter fucking nonsense. What a scrub. That was fucking lame as shit, dude.
Money only got tighter as the YouTube adpocalypse happened, where advertisers started to withdraw their funding from YouTube over concerns that their products were appearing on inflammatory content, which began to affect the income of many large and noteworthy channels on the platform, which somehow included DSP. His brand of being crude and uncouth was catching up to him, as the changing market demanded that he alter his business model to better adhere to the status quo. Phil didn't fold in this regard and kept saying what was on his mind, for better or for worse. On the 2nd of March, Phil shared that he was laid off by Machinima after having worked with him for 6 years. It was likely due to him being advertiser unfriendly, and I mean, eating his meat on a livestream tends to do that, and the company itself was already facing financial problems of its own. Phil would later open up a Teespring shop to try to sell his own official merchandise, but I can't imagine too many people were dropping their hard-earned cash on his stuff. Phil realized that he was stuck between a rock and a hard place, and this was arguably all his fault. He made every single wrong decision that he could have, never even once stopping to reevaluate the position that he put himself in, let alone trying to look into the consequences of what his forthcoming potential action could bring him to. AdSense was screwed. Machinima didn't have any ties with him. His numbers were down across the board, and pretty much the only people that were tuning into him at this point were his usual dens, either upset former fans or people that just happened to stop by to catch him withering away. A new company, Curse, approached Phil with an opportunity for him to try to get a proper cash flow going again. Compared to not making anything, Curse could have been a blessing for him if he wasn't Phil. Curse was allegedly paying him more money than he had received with Machinima in recent years, at the cost of losing the safety net once provided by Machinima since it was an accredited partner and all that stuff. This was a significant trade-off, but I'd argue the money was more important at this point. If he wanted to use copyrighted materials, he'd be shit out of luck. But this was also a chance for him to use some of that newly earned cash to finance some exclusive media for his content. But then again, that'd also make too much sense. Another company, Poltavi, also reached out to Phil during this period. They proposed giving him another partnership along the lines of what Machinima offered, alongside the additional money that Curse had promised Phil. It never occurred to DSP that something about this felt a little far-fetched. I mean, why would these companies want to work with him in such an extensive way after he screwed himself time and time again? It's not as if his squabbles with YouTube and his audience weren't public information at this point. Anybody could Google DarkSydePhil and see the trail of destruction left in his path whenever he'd stir up controversy. He's just not a worthwhile candidate for this kind of investment and protection. The biggest pull for Poltavi, at least in Phil's eyes, was that they were supposedly capable of tracking down all detractor-created content, such as This Is How You Don't Play, and claim it as his own original creation, therefore he'd profit from any money earned on said uploads. So, of course, he agreed to work with them and ended his short-lived contract with Curse. Phil was drooling at the thought of being able to profit from his own failures. The troll-created content was already more popular than he was, so why not make a little extra scratch? I get his mindset, I do, but how did he not see all the red flags here? Why is it that this company was able to provide him with all of the juicy bits of business that he was hoping for, but no widely known and verifiable corporation had any interest in entering a business relationship with him? Turns out Poltavi was nothing more than a bullshit ploy from another company, Leveria, to try to force their way into YouTube's good graces. Leveria wasn't big enough for YouTube to care about them, and they were trying very hard to latch onto any notable creator that looked their way. This meant that they weren't going to be able to provide Phil any of the things that they had agreed to, and Phil had tore apart his business yet again for seemingly no good reason. Funny thing that Curse did agree to take him back, at least for now. This arrangement wouldn't last forever, and Phil would somehow find a way to survive despite having taken his channel and jammed a thorny dick in its metaphorical butt. Phil was doing everything he could, well, everything he was willing to do, and part of that was sharing too many details about his personal life. Phil did not start his online career by sharing the more intimate parts of his life, instead opting to do that after he realized how much money there was to be made as long as he was able to push out more content for his ravenous fans to eat up. When he failed to find anything new to say about what was happening with games, new and old at the time, he realized that there's an almost unlimited supply of things in his life that he could easily talk about as long as people were interested. As such, Phil began to talk about things that were bothering him in his personal life, like things he feared or something that was irritating him as of late. When he introduced his girlfriend Panda Lee into the mix, this only gave him more things to complain about. The two didn't seem to be a good fit for each other, outside of mirroring each other's toxic behavior when gaming. When the two would play games together, like something that was cooperative and there were other people present, Leanna would be somewhat aggressive. One could argue that this was her trying to ape the behavior of men in online games who tend to act assertive or macho, or conversely, you could see this as a sign that she couldn't even relax when playing games, be it because she didn't want to make content with Phil, or because she didn't want to play the game with him period. Or maybe she just wanted them all to herself. Who knows? The point is, she didn't seem like a happy camper, and the relationship suffered because both parties didn't deal with their emotions in a healthy way. But remember, I'm just on the outside looking in. Most of the time, when she appeared on camera, she had this deer-in-headlights look about her. There was something about the camera rolling that made her come off as stiff or uncomfortable. And that's fine. Not everybody has what it takes to be an entertainer or to speak on a public platform. I get it. Perhaps being almost forced into content creation due to her involvement with Phil is what drove her to be a little catty. But I'm also not an astute detective, so I can't say shit about her for sure. I do think she had an affection for him. She had to love him in order to stay with him for so long, because it's not like she was sticking around for his assets or some incredible sex. Though DSP being a pro at laying pipe is a funny thought. She had to love him despite his flaws, but his actions and her own insecurities likely burned the relationship to the ground. Trolls would often refer to her as his daughter because of how much older he looked than her, plus I'm pretty sure he was about 10 years older than her, but I could be wrong. And this undoubtedly got back to the both of them. I mean, they were reading the comments. They knew how much people didn't like them. Phil proposed to her in April of 2017, and she accepted his advances. This likely occurred during a period where she was unsure about the direction of her life, and was trying to hold on to whatever she could scrape together as some sort of semblance of normalcy. By May of 2017, Phil decided to talk about some medical things involving Leanna during a stream, which didn't go over well with her. Women aren't exactly big fans of their lovers going on stream and saying things about them that are embarrassing while hundreds of people watch. If you're looking to get your ass kicked, talking about your woman's medical problems on the air is a surefire way to guarantee you'll get a kick right in the jimmy. This, from what I understand, caused the rift between them to finally sever into two pieces. Panda Lee broke things off with Phil because he couldn't give her an ounce of respect, and she finally got away from him. She seems to live a normal life now, and I hope she's found a way to be happy. Phil's content continued as it always did despite this. He still seems to be hung up about Leanna. As of the research of this video, Panda Lee was confirmed to be pregnant and Phil wasn't too enthused to hear the news. He didn't say anything derogatory about her, but he certainly didn't appear to be happy for her either. I think it's likely safe to assume that he doesn't want anybody to do better after having met him. Or perhaps he's envious that she's finally starting a family and has the happiness that he was unable to give her. Remember, he's supposed to be the high point.
I need banana, tasty banana, put banana in my mouth, squeeze the peel, it comes in, then squeeze banana!
Leanna is very lucky in this case, because she managed to escape Phil's perpetual pity party. He's always down in the dumps. There's always something that is preventing him from making the money that he desires. He's always right and everyone else is wrong. He shares a lot of traits with Wings of Redemption in that respect, but Phil needs to learn to be happy with what he does have. Being thankful for the people and things that are here now is what's going to make life more fulfilling. But once again, that makes too much sense and we just can't have that. But for the foreseeable future, Phil's content had to only feature his lonesome self. He didn't have somebody to sit beside him while he whined about a series of ones and zeros outsmarting him in a children's game, and this meant that the content that he was putting out felt colder. To give credit where it's due, he did try to put on a positive face and push forward through his streams, but his execution was lackluster as per usual. He couldn't hide his dissatisfaction with the way his life was turning out. This was just how things were for the time being. He made his bed, and now he had to sleep in it. Surprisingly, DSP didn't stay single for too terribly long, as just 10 months later, in March of 2018, Phil introduced his newest flame to his audience, Kat. The two started their relationship around the summer of 2017, and they were living together by February the following year. Phil kept her away from the content for a considerable amount of time, which is impressive given his tendency to immediately jump the gun and try to force his associates into his videos. Maybe I'm being overly analytical or judgmental, but I think it's silly how much he relies on others to be part of his content. It's one thing to say, hey, I'd like to incorporate this person into my hobby because I think it'd be fun, and another to say, you know what, I need more money. I should include this person in my shaky and unreliable business. As we all know, true love is when somebody wants you to help them save their sinking ship. From what I've been able to find, she hasn't appeared in the content too much. Not a bad idea on her part to keep her distance from the barrage of nonsense that's always closely following behind Phil wherever he goes. Many people theorize that the main reason she wasn't appearing, at least initially, is because the two were already having problems in their relationship, while others try to suggest that maybe she wanted to keep her distance from all of his bullshit. Or maybe somehow Phil had come to the realization that perhaps it wasn't a good idea to incorporate his romantic endeavors into his job.
There have been a lot of questions in regards to my viewership and my fan base asking, why hasn't Phil done videos with Kat? Why aren't there vlogs? Why hasn't she been in gameplay? Why hasn't she been on streams? You know, and I hear it from both sides. I hear it from very positive people, you know, the kind of people who hang out on my streams daily and we have a great time. And of course, you got the negative idiots who constantly have to spin it in a negative way that something must be wrong and there's a reason why, you know, she hasn't been in everything yet.
The reveal video where we first got to meet Kat was really uncomfortable, but this is just an active trend among his work. She seems like she's out of her element, and Phil didn't have a way to relieve her stress and make her feel at ease. It's amazing how much easier it is to talk in front of a camera or microphone once you learn to not care, and it's not something you usually figure out right away. Phil had years of experience of sitting in front of a recorder and talking aimlessly, and there's something truly special that also gives me secondhand embarrassment about witnessing him trying to make yet another woman feel comfortable with being part of his content. Though, all things considered, this was a big opportunity for DSP. He had a chance to try his hand at love one more time, to undo his negative qualities or at least learn how to keep them managed, and to carve out a healthy and loving future for both him and his new lover. So few people are given as many chances as Phil has received over the years, and I'm willing to bet you can guess how he handled this relationship. But, in typical Phil fashion, he's always got to say too much at the worst possible time. I'm sure she greatly appreciated it when he talked about her having a bush, and how he'd love to dive right into her cavernous entrance. There's nothing women love more than when their man openly talks about wanting to munch on their carpet while people sit in horror. Tell me, dear viewer, if you happen to be a woman that has watched up to this point, how would you feel about your boyfriend or whatever going on a public platform and talking about your hairy snatch? I'm willing to bet you wouldn't be too enthused.
Third out of the third says, do you like to land face first in bushes? Depends. It depends on if it's... I'm not going to say that. There's only one bush I would land in currently, that's for sure. There's only one bush I would land in. Because I'm a faithful guy, let's put it that way.
The relationship is certainly nothing to brag about these days, with their quarrels and squabbles being the topic of discussion among people who watch Lolcows, especially on websites dedicated to documenting eccentric or unusual people like kiwi farms. It's a widely accepted theory that Phil and Kat have been on the rocks for some time now, and the relationship is holding on by just a thread. As mentioned before, Kat has pretty much never appeared in the content in a consistent form, with her most notable appearance other than her introduction being the Halloween stream. This broadcast received a lot of criticism and was the subject of the usual trolling that Phil had come to expect. He'd been beefing with almighty Tevin, a detractor that was making a fool of Phil by picking apart the many flaws and inconsistencies in his presentation. Kat wasn't thrilled to witness all of the hateful messages that were being dropped in chat. People making comments about her looks, DSP's voice, how sucky their show is, bringing up his many screw-ups and tarnished reputation. It wasn't the hunky-dory spooky day stream that they had hoped for, instead being a mediocre mess just like everything else that Phil has ever put out. Tevin was the target for most of DSP's ire, shifting the blame of the disaster stream onto him. When you're somebody like Phil, you get used to people making negative comments about you. Sure, it probably doesn't feel good to witness all kinds of hate get thrown your way, but at the same time it would surely have to lose its sting after a while, right? Then again, I suppose that'd require having a thicker skin, and Phil has shown countless times that he can't handle the heat. But regardless, Kat has been pretty removed from his YouTube stuff after seeing nasty opinions about her and the man whom she sleeps with. And not to be that guy, but where did she go on Halloween night? All I'm saying is, if someone isn't happy in a relationship and there's an opportunity for them to go searching for the dirty, damp, and deep, especially on a night of debauchery like Halloween, it's the perfect opportunity for her to find somebody who would be willing to give her some festive, frothy filling. Women can be pretty strong and take a lot of shit, but many of them also fall apart if you make crude observations about their looks. If you really think about it, the smartest thing she could have done is remove herself from that situation. There's no way to look good when being involved with Mr. Burnell, but it's an intelligent decision on her part to keep her distance. She should probably keep a permanent wall between herself and Phil, but you know. I might be talking out of my ass here, so bear with me for a second. But I think calling out your online enemies or your detractors while your girlfriend is currently away trying to heal the emotional wounds caused by invisible Wi-Fi signals might be the wrong move. To claim that your trolls are criminals because they restream you and give commentary on the content, going out of their way to criticize what you do is, well, pretty intellectually dishonest.
There's a sick motherfucker on the internet called Tevin who likes to illegally restream my fucking streams and has an army of fucking trolls who are the only reason why he has any notoriety is because he copies my shit, and he eggs his trolls on to do negative shit like this, to come to my stream and to basically make fun of my girlfriend and do nasty shit. It's his fault that this kind of stuff happens, and anyone who supports that kind of fucking content is a mentally ill asshole who has no fucking conscience or morals. And the bottom line is the only reason he does it is because he knows he can get away with it because YouTube won't shut down his streams even though what he does is completely illegal. They don't care.
I understand not liking that people disagree with you. It can be difficult to accept that there's people out there that would like to see you endure untold amount of misery, but giving them attention by comparing them to hardened criminals is certainly one of the worst moves you could ever make. He should have just stopped streaming for a bit and hung out with his girl. It would have been more beneficial in the long run. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, if you troll somebody on the internet, you're basically a weapons trafficking, drug dealing, house robbing, car stealing, thieving crook who should be put away for your innumerable crimes. How fucking dare you troll anybody on the internet? You should have your kneecaps broken for being so despicable. Trolls and detractors that monitor Phil's antics are pretty active and will certainly go out of their way to keep tabs on what DSP and his wife are up to. In fact, in June of 2022, an older photo of Phil and Kat in a car was posted onto an anti-DSP Discord server and was later shared onto the Kiwi farms. This revealed the primary reason why Phil was shielding Kat away from his content. Her weight had exponentially increased. Like I said before, women typically don't respond well to criticisms about superficial things. I mean, most people don't, but especially women. While she's not a gigantic ham planet like some of the more controversial ladies on the internet, she's still noticeably larger than she used to be. This is likely a major factor as to why she isn't in the content, because realistically if she happened to pop up for one of Phil's streams again, the chat would be flooded with impolite comments about her weight. She wouldn't be able to ignore it, and odds are that Phil would probably embarrass her further while trying to defend her honor. I'm not going to be cruel and beat the woman over her head with the factual observation that she's ballooned up a bit, because I can't justifiably say what the reasoning for her weight change is. Most people become obese because of their screwed up diets, but there's also medical reasons why somebody may end up going up in shirt sizes. Either way, there's no denying that people would say unkind things about her, so realistically for her, it's best if she doesn't get too involved in Phil's livestream snorting. However, when she has engaged with the content, she tends to keep herself partially removed from everything going on. When she's done co-op content with her hubby, she tends to ignore chat and focuses solely on the game. Phil, being the brilliant host that he is, could not recognize that her being uninvolved in what's going on while she's the focal point of the stream just makes the broadcast teeter on being unwatchable. Whether or not she's justified in what she's doing is neither here nor there, but Phil should know when to rein the streams in. But conversely, if he actually knew how to moderate his work, then I wouldn't be here belittling his lifelong mission of being an entertainer. But don't worry, the two have a healthy enough relationship that Phil feels inclined to share that they didn't do anything together on Valentine's Day. But for what reason, you may ask? Could it be due to Phil's on and off battles with the internet, or is it because she's seeing somebody else? Well, I want you to take an educated guess because you're not ready for the answer.
Any plans for Valentine's Day? Sadly, no. I believe that my wife has to work. Let me take a look at the date. I think my wife has to work that day. Oh, wait, no. So my wife and I looked into it, and we were like, oh, this is fun. Let's do something on Valentine's Day, because we actually could have it off. And we look, it's a Friday. Oh, no. Yo, that's the worst. Valentine's Day on a Friday, the day when historically everyone is out doing stuff, everyone goes out to dinner, everything. So we've decided we do want to have like a romantic day at some point, but it ain't going to be Valentine's Day because that's like the worst date for it. We're going to probably have a day later on in the month that we're going to take off from work together and spend time together, and it's not going to be Valentine's Day because it's just not going to be timing-wise make sense. So
that special lovey-dovey day fell on a Friday, which meant that other human beings that were basking in love and experiencing romance were going to get in their way. So, in order to avoid having to go out and be a healthy, functional couple, Phil and Kat opted to stay home for the time being. They'd have a steamy night out soon enough, but God forbid they go out and be near other people. In their eyes, it's far more fulfilling to spend the day wallowing around instead of focusing a bit on social interaction. You know, like going out for a date instead of talking to random people on the internet. With all of this new information now freshly installed in your brain, or perhaps you've merely been refamiliarized, it's not hard to see why Phil has made himself into such a target. I won't lie, there's times when I'm watching archives of him as he keeps taking lashing after lashing, and I do feel the slightest little modicum of pity for him. I don't think it's fair that human beings can be turned into characterized parodies of themselves, but then again that makes me a hypocrite, and I remember that he more or less did this to himself. His numbers have taken a noticeable dip since his golden years, and there's multiple reasons why he's not as popular as he used to be. His audience has matured beyond his humor. Most people that subscribed to his work were young at the time, and some just went along with whatever the internet found to be funny at that particular moment. And as time has moved on, so have his fans. With this, it's safe to assume that his regular viewers started to notice the cracks at his mask. As his views steadily began to decrease as he was becoming less favorable in the eyes of his fans, he blamed his critics for his dwindling support, trying to suggest that their overwhelmingly negative view of him has discouraged newcomers from showing up and sticking around. I mean, it's entirely possible. I don't doubt that his public reception has played a major part in his fall from fame, but I also have a hard time believing that people aren't tuning into his streams and are instantly turned off by his begging and blame shifting. He once tried to compare his videos being removed to him being stabbed and left for dead. Never mind the fact that he was removing videos on his own terms, which was a large factor in the slow bleed out of his business. But sure, I guess it's more or less the same as dying in the moonlight. Phil had an active group of former fans that were following him around online and criticizing his every move, known as the Sons of Kojima. This group is led by the ever-eccentric and uncontrollably autistic Fred Fuchs. When DSP tries to push the narrative that all of his haters are part of some kind of illicit cabal or secret society that practically worships the ground that he walks on while also simultaneously shitting on him until the cows come home, he's referring to the Sons of Kojima. I can only assume they took this name because Phil had expressed his distaste for Kojima's games, because I guess he's not allowed to have opinions. Part of maturing as a gamer is admitting that Kojima is a bit of a hack, but whatever. This group spent a disproportionate amount of time documenting, reviewing, and picking apart the many things that Phil was uploading, and that's fine. If they feel like spending their free time trying to hurt the feelings of a loser on the internet, why should anybody even care? They were doing weekly podcasts where they dumped on him over and over ad nauseum, without adding any real substantial criticism beyond "Phil sucks at games, he's a grifter, he's a bad lover." The same things that basically everybody had said and continues to regurgitate to this day. This group was even more toxic and unstable than Phil himself, with many leaks occurring over time, illustrating how the group was more or less falling apart at the hands of Freddy Boy. From what I was able to find, thanks to Fred's Kiwi Farms thread, some of Fred and his buddies' actions are, but are certainly not limited to, submitting fraudulent copyright strikes against DSP, organizing to and eventually taking down videos that were against SOK's views, alongside reporting accounts and other social media pages, pitting associates against one another to have them take each other out through the internet, I guess, recording conversations in their Discord voice chats, with some people being entirely unaware of what was happening, and most interestingly, flipping the fuck out if somebody put out a video talking about Phil that also happened to be monetized. This one really blows my mind. At what point does somebody belong to another person, like Phil is somebody's personal cow? They were creating publicly available streams where people could come together and dunk on Phil. Never mind all of the other groups and people that are more or less doing the same thing and had done it prior to this. They wanted to have a dumpy, snorting failure of a gamer all to themselves. Why the fuck would they want to isolate the pig roach? Many members of the group began jumping ship when things got hot and leaks started pouring out of the group, which was obviously the right decision. People around the internet were understandably entertained by watching morons that orbit a Lolcow start to crack under pressure. If you go and touch the poo, meddle with cows, and try to involve yourself in their nonsense, you'll eventually get eaten alive. You can't just play in mud and expect not to get dirty. Phil didn't even have to do anything other than whine that he was getting unjustly abused by folks on the internet, and the crew just dissolved itself over time. I feel this situation is accurately explained with his classic Friedrich Nietzsche quote, "He who fights with monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster, and if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you." Simply put, cow tipping means you're eventually gonna step in cow shit, and cow pies can be really annoying to clean off your shoes. Phil's notoriety has allowed him to bump shoulders with notable members of the YouTube community, which is usually a good thing for an up-and-coming creator. Networking is a useful tool to achieve success in most fields, so Phil had a unique opportunity set before him, a chance to mingle with other people that might have some tips for him, and even a chance for collaboration. Some of these notable figures are, and of course are not limited to, Total Biscuit, aka the Cynical Brit. Seen as one of the most important and influential commentators for PC gaming prior to his death in 2018, he'd certainly be quite the reputable person to have in your corner. But alas, in order to properly convince someone to view you in a favorable light in the profession of gaming journalism, you have to have a bit of respect, you know? A little decorum. In 2012, Phil gave the game Journey, an indie game made by that game company, a scathing review which didn't align with the general reception of the product. In this, he started shit-talking Total Biscuit for having a differing view on the subject. Phil's beef with him was, get this, that Total Biscuit had declared Journey as his Game of the Year for 2012. God forbid that someone has an opinion that doesn't match up with yours, right? Total Biscuit saw right through Phil's facade, knowing exactly what type of person DSP really is. People like Phil will often try to compare themselves to others when trying to prove a meaningless point. Phil has routinely tried to masquerade himself as a trustworthy and reliable figure in gaming, like he knows all there is to know about video games. Biscuit made sure to point out that Phil was name-dropping him as a means to try to sell a lie that the two were associates of some sort, but of course Phil was lying through his teeth. This eventually spilled out when Total Biscuit was asked about his opinion regarding DSP and his behavior during one of his broadcasts, wherein he carefully explained why he believed that DSP is a phony, comparing him to a court jester, and that Phil naturally brings himself so much hate because of the way he carries himself.
And it's why I try and make this stream as chill as possible, because who the fuck wants to listen to somebody raging, right? It's like, that's the fucking DarkSydePhil style of doing things. Blame everybody that isn't you, and people watch to watch you rage. Like, do you want to be the fucking court jester? No, you don't. You want to be taken seriously.
Phil responded to this by calling Total Biscuit an elitist, a very typical sign of deflection. I suppose I shouldn't expect much from Phil though, huh? Moving along, another notable person that Phil has had squabbles with is Toby Turner, known better as Tobuscus. This guy is another person that Phil had entered a stupid online skirmish with for, and you're not gonna believe this, because Phil was upset that he was getting ads on his videos and advertised Tobuscus. This was 2012, when there were far less boogeymen and looming corporate concerns affecting the platform, so Phil had to find something to be upset about so he could rant to the camera.
A few years ago, they had this real heavy ad campaign for other YouTubers would advertise their channels on your stuff, and it didn't make sense. Like, I had people cooking and people doing all this stupid shit advertising on my YouTube videos. It made no sense, and it was just really fucking stupid, and it did promote other people's channels, which is a bad business practice. So I disagree with that, and I still to this day will disagree if ever there's an advertisement on anyone's channel that's advertising a competitor's channel. It's not fair. It's an underhanded business practice. It should not happen, and I stand by my statements from back in 2011. It's bullshit. Toby was at fault, EA was at fault, YouTube was at fault, everyone was collectively at fault at that time.
Honestly, this is such a stupid thing for him to worry about, as these advertisements were still helping pay his bills regardless. I understand that he saw Tobuscus as a competitor to his work, because yeah, YouTube is all about competing with other people to try to get more views and watch time and what have you, but Phil has always been about the money. Since the beginning of his YouTube career, he wanted to wring out as much cash as he could out of this thing, so any money earned from a played ad should just be gravy. Glass half empty, glass half full. You feel me? Some years later in 2016, Toby was accused of sexual assault by his ex-girlfriend, April Fletcher, known by her web handle April F. This was a hot topic because Tobuscus was a pretty popular person in the business, and needless to say, people were shocked. Phil had been asked what he thought about the entire situation, and instead of going over the topic with a fine-tooth comb and trying to adequately put his words in a concise and cohesive manner, he instead made the video about himself and the many calamities that he has had to endure on a regular basis. Perhaps taking a story about a person allegedly being drugged and abused and finding a way to turn the story into a pity party about yourself and all the things on your mind is, oh, I don't know, selfish and sick? But shit, what do I know? Maybe he really is the king of hate. Anyhow, let's keep moving along, shall we? Another big, or rather rotund, figure that Phil has had problems with is ReviewTech USA, the resident chubby funster of YouTube who's turned his business from talking about games and technology to whining about the state of the world and politics and how hard it is to be a fat guy on the internet who talks about the intricacies of stupid shit. These two should have been natural allies, as they spend all their time bumming around playing video games with their hands out as they demand a shekel or two. But considering these two are a little too much alike in the worst ways, this meant that they also couldn't get along. Typically, at least from my observation, two hateful folks that are cut from the same cloth tend to end up hating each other because they see too much of themselves in the other person. These two have made potshots at each other several times over the years, with their respective negative opinions of one another having gotten more aggressive in recent times. There have been brief periods where the two seemed like they were getting along, at least on some kind of cordial level, but this would never last for too long. The thing about these two individuals is that they're two sides of the same coin. Neither one offers anything substantial or new. Neither one is capable of maintaining an audience outside of a collection of folks who watch to witness the dumpster fire steadily burn, and they blame all of their problems on everything but them. They seem to be clueless that, in the many problems they both faced, they're the common denominators in these situations. After so many screw-ups, kerfuffles, and meltdowns, maybe it's time they realize that they're not the victims they really believe they are. There's a lot to talk about with RTU, but he deserves a video of his own. Maybe someday. Lastly, Phil has interacted with the core of Lolcow Live many times over the years. I'm sure you're aware of this by now, but Lolcow Live is an unfunny, forced humor, boring as shit talk show that was once hosted by Boogie2988, Wings of Redemption, and the bald-bearded buffoon Keemstar. This podcast is essentially what happens when you take a few notable Lolcows and try to apply WWE-style drama and narratives to their online persona. As if the controversies that surrounded the host wasn't already enough of a shit show, they felt the need to manufacture a bunch of unwatchable dreck for the masses. DSP was initially invited to come on the show and be a part of the core group, alongside a slump cash payout of $50,000, but in a strange moment of self-awareness, DSP shot down the idea. For once, he wasn't going to put himself in the hot seat and allow himself to be ridiculed by people in an environment that he couldn't control. If he was going to be mercilessly clowned on for the way he acts, he's better off doing his own thing so he can at least keep himself insulated. Phil publicly denounced the show, questioning the legitimacy of the supposed plot lines that were carrying the podcast along. He might have been interested if the drama wasn't manufactured and was actually authentic, but Keemstar and authenticity are two things that don't go together. DSP allegedly contacted Wings and Boogie in an attempt to get them to dip from Lolcow Live and join him for a more focused and grounded would show. When Keem learned of this, he labeled Phil's activities as tortious interference, meaning that DSP was intentionally trying to disrupt Keemstar's business for his own personal gain. On one hand, Phil was actually doing something wrong by trying to sabotage another man's business, but on the other, Keem's a massive puss if he thinks that trying to silence people with litigation is justifiable. Plus, does he really think that DSP has stable enough finances to make it financially viable for him to try to strip him of his own income? Well, about that. In 2020, Phil filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy as a means to deal with his nearly $500,000 worth of debt. A lot of people get eaten alive by the debts that they take on, and Phil was almost one of those unfortunate casualties. But somehow, by the grace of the Lolcow gods, Phil managed to get his debts discharged in May of 2020. Bankruptcy is a very serious thing, and this meant that some of Phil's assets had to be liquidated to accommodate for the debt, or at least what the courts were willing to accept as non-exempt items. Either way, Phil managed to get his debts cleared, meaning he was once again a free man. Sorta, kinda, not really. At least he wasn't going to make the same mistake again, right? A fresh start meant that he could put his right foot forward and work to build a much more stable and secure future for himself. In 2021, one of DSP's detractors had managed to get their hands on some particularly sensitive information. I think we can all agree that one's own finances are a pretty touchy subject. While some people do quite well for themselves, others don't have much luck or aren't as responsible with their earnings. As such, banking is a very personal subject, so asking people to show how much they have or make is almost comparable to asking a woman why she's so fucking fat. This information was forwarded to Kiwi Farms, which has their own subforum dedicated to the documentation and discussion of DarkSydePhil. Say what you will about the site, but they're damn good at keeping tabs and archival, even if they do say the gamer word quite a bit. The information was initially shared by a user going by the username Boof, and while the legitimacy of their claims was initially questioned, the pertinent documents were subsequently shared with the site. Phil's bills and spending habits were carefully analyzed and compiled into a legible graph by the site user Mr. Brown. Upon inspection, it seemed that Phil's largest expense for that time was WWE Champions, a wrestling-themed mobile puzzle game, at 21% of his overall spending for that year. I wish I was joking. That makes up for $8,225.62 spent on the game alone. There were other sizable chunks, like 19% for his mortgage at $7,397.52, 12% for taxes, $4,799.64, 10% for groceries, $3,930.88. But then you see the smaller percentages, but they're still way too high, like 3% for alcohol at $1,062.40, and 6% for eating out at $2,358.23. This perfectly explained why Phil had been begging for money for years. He's just not responsible with his income. I'm not gonna fault the guy for whatever he's paying for responsible expenses, because I don't give a shit about what he drives or what groceries he's purchasing. But that much on a video game? Really? And a mobile puzzle game to boot? Come on. The grand total that Phil had spent on everything calculated was $38,872. Imagine what you could do with that amount of money. What major life changes could you make for you and your family with that kind of cheddar? This leak was catastrophic for Phil. His detractors were now even more aware of the foolishness that he practiced on a daily basis. Phil has tried time and time again to present himself as a responsible adult who manages his finances, does his YouTube stuff for fun rather than financial growth, and that he's an upstanding businessman. But what could he do in this instance? Would this be the fall of his business? Was he going to curl up into a ball and die? Shockingly, no. He just ran things as if nothing went wrong, treating everything more or less as business as usual, just adding in his tried and true method of aimlessly bitching about how unfairly he's treated. I mean, yeah, nobody should have their bank info hijacked and shared with the world, but at the same time, I can't deny that Phil's antics are pathetically humorous. In more recent times, Phil has been stuck doing the same thing he's always done, but with far less fanfare and a considerable lack of energy. Phil's a much older man than when he was starting out, so it's to be expected that he'd slow down a bit and not have the same drive to push hardcore into his silly job, even if his career is comfy and requires him to play video games. But it's not hard to see why he's burnt out. I don't believe this was truly Phil's passion. When he viewed making his hobby into a career, he romanticized all of the fun parts that he thought he'd experience, and focused a little too hard on the good things that he did have the pleasure partaking in. However, now that the party has long since ended and he's left trying to figure out what the hell he wants to do with his channel, he's seemingly uninterested in trying to find a way to make his job worthwhile.
Are you kidding?
He hasn't gotten any better at playing games, and in some ways it seems like he's gotten worse. I get it. I'm not as good at Call of Duty as I was when I was younger, as I can't figure out how kids are jumping and sliding around in the game like it's Unreal Tournament. But Phil exercises such futile attempts at gameplay that is downright pathetic. If he's playing a game that he's completed before, especially on video, he will still demonstrate entirely new ways of screwing up his playthrough. His demeanor has eroded from being mild-tempered and kind of pathetic to just hateful and gross. He's clearly not a happy person, disregarding his own faults and mistakes as the actions of more ignorant people. Nothing is ever his fault, and on the rare occasion he's backed into a corner and has to explain his actions, he'll always find a justification behind his actions beyond him just having poor character traits. Rest assured, even when he's caught doing something stupid red-handed, it was the influence of someone else that made him make the foolish decision. I'm not trying to play armchair psychologist here. I don't have a degree, and even trying to act like I'm an authority on the subject would be idiotic. But I believe Phil is a deeply manic and depressed person. Put yourself in his shoes and trying to rationalize the goofy stuff he's done over the years, for whatever reason he may have done them. He's a man who's led by his ego, and that ego is solely based on his self-worth. He determines his value based on the reception of his work, like how people respond to his videos or streams, and the amount of money generated from his efforts. Phil was likely a child who received a lot of positive reinforcement by parents or other authority figures, but was never taught lessons in humility or personal responsibility. He doesn't allow himself to fail in a way that is graceful, but the first part of picking yourself up and fixing your problems is acknowledging your part in them. Phil, from what I can see as a Z-list YouTube commentator, is stuck in a negative feedback loop. He puts out something mediocre because he was lazy or ignorant to something. The content is mocked and his financial return is below the threshold of where he wants it to be, so he feels discouraged or heartbroken by the public's opinion, and that affects his work drive. I'm sure we've all been so depressed at one point that we hated the idea of going into work, and realistically that probably did affect what we were capable of doing at that moment. But that simply cannot be allowed to turn into a habitual behavior. Not to mention that everything he puts out is 10 times more boring than it used to be. While he may not have ever produced anything that is actually groundbreaking, it does feel like the dazzling part of his antics have long since passed. The climax was witnessed, documented, and archived, and now we're just watching the perpetual falling action. Phil also seems lonelier than ever. The internet age has radically changed the way that humans communicate and share information, and it's played a large part as to why so many people are so antisocial these days. It's easier than ever to exist as a hermit, only interacting with other people when absolutely necessary, and even then it can be done through a buffer, such as a microphone or video camera. DSP doesn't have to leave his house to clock into work and see other folks. He doesn't have to clean himself up and shake hands and make deals. He also doesn't have to worry about pleasing a boss who doesn't appreciate his work. Phil's business is based entirely off of speculation and the generosity of his viewers. His paycheck fluctuates based on his work performance, and big money is not guaranteed with each upload, so he has to navigate his way around trying to find the next hit idea for his channel. Alongside this, he actually has to beg his viewers to give him money so he can meet his financial goals, often with no reward for the viewer in the process other than him keeping his lights on, therefore more streams. But honestly, how can we reasonably trust he's not going to screw around with any of the money that's given to him based on the bank leaks? Yeah, sure, people can change, Phil just rarely does. He's spoken about his marital troubles with Kat. He doesn't interact with many other creators on the platform, and we never see him linking up with people in person anymore to create videos and other collaborative efforts. It's literally just the DarkSydePhil show, his small chat that still turns up, and the few people that keep giving him money. It's hard to imagine where he's going next, but if I had to take an educated guess, I'd assume nowhere. He's always going to be where the money is, but that doesn't mean he's going to be raking in thousands upon thousands of dollars hand over fist. He'll survive somehow, because there's always people willing to support him. Without the delusional folks that give him money, he's nothing. He won't believe he has any worth, and it's not like most of his audience even thinks he does. And a majority of his viewership that hate watches him will always be around to witness him fumble. Something I noticed when researching Phil is that he has a wide variety of active detractors that watch his streams, keep tabs on every dumb thing that he says, bad moves he makes in a game, or every time he clears his throat. At times, this interest they exhibit borders on obsession, but who am I to judge? Their desire to mock and ridicule him is none of my concern, and they also operate as a partial driving force to DSP. He hates how there are people out there that dislike him to such a point, commenting how other channels will restream him and have more viewers, and how many people tune into clip channels rather than anything he's put out. But that motivates him. His ego won't allow him to be made fun of, and he will continue pushing back in the most lethargic way possible. DSP and his fan base have a symbiotic relationship. Phil provides content for his viewers, whether they like him or not, and they reward him with coins and attention, positive or negative. It's a feedback loop for both sides, and is truly a spectacle to behold. There's a lot to his story, and of course there's no way I could ever possibly get to everything in this video without being here for another few hours. Ultimately, I think Phil is going to be doing his thing for the rest of the indefinite future. I don't see an end to his story anytime soon, and if history is to be taken into consideration, I think it's safe to assume that nothing can kill him. A nuclear bomb could drop directly on his home and destroy everything in its path, organic materials, man-made structures, life as a whole, but somehow at the center of the crater would be Phil, horrifically mutilated and mutated, but still breathing. He may take some time to catch his bearings and rebuild himself to the same mediocre position that he was at before, but rest assured he cannot be stopped. Phil, despite many efforts to the contrary, will never be stifled. His plot armor is too thick, and he wouldn't pay attention to the on-screen controls to fight back even if his life depended on it. I commend the people that have spent so long archiving him, talking about Phil online, and making the process of researching him that much easier. Mr. Burnell is certainly a tricky person to try to decipher and understand. DarkSydePhil is a standing relic of the past, a statue that has somehow stood the test of time and remains upright, but with an ever so slight slouch. He's not a professional in anything he doesn't improve. He also has no intention of going anywhere, and I find that weirdly comforting. Even if Phil's a fool, he stayed consistent on that front. If I ever want some background noise, I could turn on some footage of DSP that's been compiled by his more dedicated viewers and get all of the juiciest bits from his streams. Sometimes, when the dust is settled, you've just got to appreciate that some things never change. But with that being said, that's going to be it for today's video. If you like what I do, leave a comment, rate, and subscribe. If you want to support me in a more personal way, you can check out the Patreon link and the Teespring link in the description. I've also got a Newgrounds account if art stuff is your thing. I've got more content coming down the pipeline. But until then, I'll see you degenerates next time.